Hello and welcome to my fifth sermon. It is April 28th of 2019 and happy Sunday. Now our planet is being crucified by climate change. I'm the author of 4 books, 2 of them just on climate change, and the burning of fossil fuels, the destruction of rainforest and other nefarious things that we have done as a species has released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases. And what that has done is like adding panes of glass to a greenhouse. It has warmed up our planet on average, and it is triggering what are called feedback loops. For example, the melting of the permafrost in the Arctic that is releasing massive amounts of methane. Methane is even more potent than carbon dioxide. And the melting of the polar ice cap, when the sun hits ice and snow, it reflects about 90% of that energy back out to space. But when it hits land or open water, it absorbs about 90% of that sunlight's energy. So that is itself causing our planet to get warmer. And there are many more of these called feedback loops. That's where the warming is triggering mechanisms that are warming up the planet, and it is getting out of control. Probably one of the worst is the methane clathrates at the bottom of the ocean, which can also create big explosions as they melt. Now, we cannot give up hope. With climate change, tornadoes are increasing, as we see on the news almost every day. Flooding is increasing majorly. Our seasons are earlier. I've planted tomatoes and peppers here in Ohio about 3 weeks early, and according to the weather, it doesn't appear we're going to have a frost. And the extreme heat in the summer. Last summer is more than 100 degrees here in Ohio, which is very unusual. And of course that can cause droughts, which can cause famines, and it increases disease. And all of this is going to be very harmful to the survival of humanity and all other species on our planet. Now, with the solutions, number one, we do have to have hope. We cannot give up on our planet. We cannot give up on all life to come. Here's a quote from our Bible relating to hope. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Now, one thing we certainly do need to do is protect our forests and turn them into old-growth forests, and protect the old-growth forests that we have. Forests do sequester carbon and hold it in the form of the trees, and they are imperative for fighting climate change. Here's a quote, Daniel chapter 4 verse 11, the tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Now also, we are going to need to restore ponds and wetlands. Ohio has already lost 99% of its original wetlands, and with the increase in flooding with climate change, we're going to need to hold on to water better. I've created a great example on my property by hand digging ponds, carefully saving the trees by digging around the roots, and I've saved a lot of water, which I am growing fish in. But we need to do this on a much bigger scale. We need lots of ponds, reservoirs, lakes, obviously done carefully in order to not cause any environmental harm. But the benefits will greatly exceed any harm as we do it carefully. And of course we are going to need to switch to solar and wind energy. I've had solar panels here on my property for almost 10 years. I use them all the time. I have a battery bank. I don't need a backup generator. And the sun is one thing we can definitely count on. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 5. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. Now also, especially on this spring day, it is a good time for people to think about growing a lot of their own food. Instead of wasting space and energy on things like lawnmowers, we can have gardens. And here's Proverbs chapter 13, verse 23. The fallow ground of the poor would yield much food, but it is swept away through injustice. Having community gardens so poor people can grow their own food is a very good thing. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. The Lord took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And also, we need to avoid waste. Composting is a very easy way of dealing with waste. It can be done in any environment from the urban to the rural. Even things like coffee filters, certainly all food wastes. Like when I cut my own hair, when I groom my dog, that hair can be composted. All yard waste, of course, can be composted. And that turns into topsoil, which can grow food. And here's a quote from our Bible, John chapter 6, verse 12. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost. And recycling is another wonderful way to save energy. Recycling one aluminum can saves enough energy to light a 100-watt bulb for 3 hours. And of course, most people don't use that much energy these days for our lights. And also, it helps save horrendous bauxite mining that is devastating vast areas like the rainforest in Brazil. And lastly, we do need punishment for environmental crimes. And above all, we have to be strong as a people and united to fight climate change. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. So let's get together and work on fighting climate change. We need people to stop denying it in any way. That's a blasphemy to God. That is a lie. And everyone have a great week. I will be back next Sunday.